Hello, hello, hello. Beautiful, beautiful fall day, and it has rained for the first time substantially in many months. Kind of a fun ride today because this is my first time out in the rain, and especially fun today because we're on the SCOR 2030. Really cool trail bike. Got 140 millimeters of travel up front, 120 in the rear. But they kind of market this bike as a little bit more sendy trail bike. As you can imagine, with 120 millimeters of travel on the rear, this bike just feels quite sprightly, quite fast, climbing. Very happy to scoot you around on the mountain. Super efficient under pedaling. When it comes to these like 120 millimeter travel bikes, I kind of always have a hard time distinguishing is that from like really nice kinematics or just the fact that, you know, we're dealing with like not too much travel to, you know, manage. So you're riding along, there's really none of that sloshing around with the rear end. And it's not like it's the most plush back end on any bike. A lot more kind of trail feel with this bike, which influences your riding style, which is kind of fun because you're always picking these clean lines and just kind of treading lightly with this bike. For sure you can just blast into stuff, but it's not going to feel as plush as a big enduro rig, but that's kind of the whole point. And certainly with the only 120 millimeters of rear travel, and with the really fast rolling Maxxis Recon on the back, this thing like totally has scooted around the mountain and like giving me a little bit of superpower when I'm riding with friends. Just so much less drag, nice lightweight bike, and good efficient package to kind of power off of in that rear end. And as far as the seated position on the bike, this large has quite the reach. It's like a 497 millimeter, even in the slack setting. I could definitely size down to that medium large model, but it has been fun to kind of experiment with a longer reach on this bike because it just gives you that extra stability that this bike is supposed to deliver. It's got a pretty upright feeling seat tube angle for being a smaller travel bike. And as far as like what I've noticed riding it is it seems to keep good and balanced going up steep terrain. It's got like a 432 millimeter chainstay in this size, which is fairly short. And just kind of where your body weight ends up. I do have the saddle all the way forward. Seems to be enough to keep that front end down. I thought the cockpit out of the box, even with the stem all the way up with the spacer stack, felt like the front end of this bike was a little bit low. So I got these Deity 50 millimeter riser bars that I'm going to start using with any of the review bikes that I feel like are too low. I do think some riders will really appreciate that low stack height because it kind of just puts you right over weighting the bars for kind of a more traditional small travel bike. But with the capability of this bike, I've just had a blast with these higher bars and have basically had zero regrets. Time for the fun part. Easy climb up today on this thing now, I gotta say. Very efficient feeling rig, which becomes very impressive once you start riding this thing downhill and you realize how hard this bike can drive. It's just such a treat. Taking this bike down Dad Bod to start, which is a nice technical trail. Really push this smaller travel bike and do our best to stay out of the holes. Yeah, this bike's got a pretty tremendous reach in this large size, and it just gives you a huge platform to feel a sense of stability between your front and rear wheel. It's like you're nice and spread out. And the cool part is you can drive fairly hard. And if you can hang on through the little bit of extra, trail vibrations, you're able to, just like that, pump the bike so beautifully just because of how kind of lightweight, how fast that rear shock ramps up, gives you this awesome non-wallowy platform to push off of. Oh my gosh, these conditions are so good after a summer of just dry, dusty skidding. Woo! Feels like bike season again. Big pop. Yeah, this thing delivers so well. When you push into that rear shock, it just kind of can catapult you back out of it. It's such an addicting feeling when you experience I don't even know how to describe it, the light-footedness of this bike. And I'm sagging the shocks a little bit more, keeping the suspension a little bit more active. And the fork, I'm running some high-speed compression just to save it if anything goes wrong. Wow, I feel like I'm just like pump tracking through this trail today. Anybody who's ridden this trail, it's definitely a little bit more technical. You got all these wheel size holes and wet roots and holes and rocks. This bike is handling it so well. It's so fun. Riding this trail on this bike right now is just like this perfect example of how, with a bike like this, you can kind of ride around the gnar and really get this like flow and speed out of this bike that you almost feel like you shouldn't be able to, just because of the lack of travel. You're not just like plunging straight into features, but you're just nitpicking your way down the mountain, picking a nice clean line. Oh man, huge puddle, oh my gosh. At least got the front wheel out of that. But my butt's probably nice and wet. Yeah, this section here might want some better tires to drive it a little harder, but it does such a good job. Can't believe we're already at the bottom. This thing just did such good work on this trail. Back to the little bit more bermed out trails on the other side of the mountain. And pretty good feeling about this, other than some slightly concerningly slick dirt with these. They spec this bike with a dissector up front and a recon tire in the rear, so got some of that like a little bit of like grease over hard pack today, so might have to take that a little easy. So fun jumping this bike. I really, really love the suspension on this bike. It's been a while since I've ridden RockShox Pike, and they've got like the new version with the Charger 3 damper, buttercups. I feel like I'm sagging this fork pretty good, and then running a good amount of high-speed compression, and I feel like it's just taking the abuse so well. And then in the back, you got the Super Deluxe, which every bike that's come on, it's just such a poppy feeling bike. Gotta say, I'm a little shy today on this greasy trail, just because it's been all summer. I've been riding the dust. I'm not sure how much confidence to have yet. As far as brakes, this comes with the code RSCs. Brake we all know and love, have tons of time on. They did spec like a 180 millimeter rotor, even in this large size, which I think is a little undergunned for the type of bike we're dealing with here. But with that said, I really haven't pushed the limit of that 180 too often, especially riding these like aggressive blues and lighter blacks. Certainly if I were to do a trail that was just straight down the mountain for 3,000 feet, I'd smoke that out. But yeah, this bike is just feeling like it was made for these kind of trails. I'm just like wafting this thing into the air. It's just such a treat. It just doesn't get old. This section and this bike were just made for each other. I don't know if I mentioned it on the climbing portion, but this bike definitely feels like magic when you pedal outside of the saddle. You know, with that like 120 millimeters of travel, it's obviously like not sliding, not too much to you know, manage. But wow, this bike feels so direct, just pedaling out of the saddle, and it just makes you want to like dig a little harder on the pedals, even while you're going down the mountain. Then as far as that like rear suspension curve, I'm obviously bottoming that little shock, but I can't feel the bottom, which is the mark of a nice progressive suspension linkage. You're just not feeling that clang, and gives you that kind of infinite travel feel when you obviously don't have it in a 120 mil bike. On to the next trail this bike was practically made for. It's just so rewarding to just push this bike in and out of these tight berms and just kind of like keep your speed and generate speed. And you feel like you don't have this just soggy, long travel bike that you're fighting with. You feel like you're quite a bit more in tune with the trail. And obviously, if you don't pick your line carefully, that's gonna beat you up more. But if you do, it's just so good. Yeah, this bike's got like a little over a 64-degree head angle in the slacker setting. Big pop. Yeah. And man, I feel like they just really hit a great balance with that, because this bike feels super stable. You know, maybe a little bit to do with this long reach, but also, you know, the steering doesn't feel twitchy, but it also doesn't feel vague. And I would know on trails like this, if we were dealing with like a super slacked out bike, yeah, man, I was not going fast enough for that jump, but I made up for it by just popping and pulling, which this bike just does so well at. So who's this bike for? This bike is just like for that rider who's riding like big climbs and riding down fast technical blue and black trails, that really wants to like just feel the trail, like maximize the fun factor, maximize rider input. Rider that's not just looking to like hang on to a sled that's gonna get them down the hill, but it's gonna kind of push, pull and pump, search for really clean lines, and shimmy down the mountain. Definitely the kind of bike that you could take on a big backcountry mission and just have such a much more efficient pedaling experience, and then still be able to do really all the scary moves. Wouldn't be as comfortable as the 170 millimeter enduro bike, but it could definitely handle it. Such a good bike to ride today, and such amazing conditions to ride it in. Just kind of a match made in heaven. So if you enjoyed the review today, consider subscribing to the YouTube channel. And for the full write-up, head on over to the Freehub magazine article, freehubmag.com. And that corner always gets me.